Outside a busy hospital, a small matted puppy holds a silent vigil night after night, his eyes fixed on the revolving doors, searching every face that emerges for the one he longs to see. When Dr. Alan Grant notices this loyal sentinel, he dismisses it as just another stray. But as days turn to weeks and the puppy remains, something about its quiet determination begins to crack the doctor's professional detachment. What drives this small creature to wait endlessly in the cold? And whose return is it so faithfully anticipating? What would you do if you discovered that the most profound lessons about love and loyalty could come from the most unexpected teachers? Where are you watching this video? Please share and follow the story below so we can spread this warmth to every corner. The fluorescent lights of Town Hospital cast a sterile, unwavering glow onto the frost-kissed pavement outside. Each night, as the hushed urgency of the emergency room hummed behind automatic doors and the muffled sounds of monitors and quiet conversations drifted from upper windows, a small, solitary figure held vigil. It was a puppy, no more than a year old, his fur a matted tapestry of brown and tan, clinging with the damp chill of the late winter air. He lay curled tightly against the base of the cold brick wall near the main entrance, a small, breathing island in the ebb and flow of human traffic. Patients, visitors, staff, they hurried past, bundled against the biting wind, their faces etched with worry or weariness, focused on their destinations within or departures from the imposing building. Few spared more than a fleeting glance for the huddled form, dismissing him as just another stray seeking meager warmth from the building's escaping heat. But this puppy wasn't seeking warmth, nor did he nose about for discarded scraps. His attention, unwavering and intense, was fixed solely on the revolving glass doors, his tired eyes tracking every person who emerged, as if scanning faces for one he desperately longed to see. Every night the vigil was the same, patient, silent, heartbreakingly hopeful. Dr. Alan Grant, a senior pediatrician whose life revolved around the precise, demanding world of childhood illnesses, first registered the puppy as little more than a peripheral annoyance. His days were long, filled with complex cases, anxious parents, and the endless river of paperwork that threatened to drown his evenings. He was a man of science and routine, known for his sharp intellect and a bedside manner that, while competent, lacked overt warmth. Sentimentality had little place in his structured existence. As he pushed through the revolving doors after a grueling 12-hour shift, tightening his scarf against the cold, his gaze briefly snagged on the small, unmoving shape. Another stray, he thought dismissively, his mind already cataloging the tasks awaiting him at home and the complex cases scheduled for the next morning. He strode toward the parking lot, the puppy momentarily forgotten. But night after night, the puppy was there, in the same spot, staring at the same doors. Dr. Grant found himself noticing details, the way the puppy's ears drooped with weariness, the slight tremor that occasionally ran through his small body, despite his apparent stoicism against the cold, the profound sadness swimming in those dark, watchful eyes. It began to prick at the edges of his professional detachment. One particularly frigid evening, the wind howling down the street like a hungry wolf, Dr. Grant exited the hospital later than usual. The pavement glittered with a treacherous layer of black ice. As he navigated carefully towards his car, his gaze fell upon the puppy, now dusted with a fine layer of wind-blown snow, yet still resolutely facing the doors. On impulse, Alan paused. "What are you doing out here, little guy?" he muttered, the words snatched away by the wind. A familiar voice answered nearby. "He's here every night, Doctor." Grant. Nurse Evans, pulling her coat tighter around her, paused beside him, her expression a mixture of sympathy and helplessness. "Been here for weeks now. We think he must be waiting for someone inside. Poor thing looks heartbroken." Alan frowned, truly looking at the dog now, not as a stray, but as a creature exhibiting a baffling, persistent loyalty. Someone inside? The implications were unsettling. A patient? An employee? His mind, trained to diagnose and solve problems, grappled with the mystery. "Has anyone reported a missing dog?" Nurse Evans shook her head. "Not that I've heard. Security keeps shooing him away from the direct entrance, but he always comes back to this spot, doesn't cause any trouble, just waits. Her gaze lingered on the puppy. It's hard to watch. Alan felt an unfamiliar pang, sharp and unexpected. He usually compartmentalized efficiently. The suffering inside the hospital was his domain. The world outside kept at a professional distance. But the sheer, unwavering devotion of this small animal chipped away at his defenses. The puppy's eyes, when they briefly met his, seemed to hold an entire narrative of loss, a story Alan felt a sudden, illogical urge to understand. He gave a curt nod to Nurse Evans and continued to his car, but the image of the waiting puppy followed him home, disrupting the neat order of his thoughts. The following evening, a light snow was falling, blanketing the town in a soft, muffling layer. Dr. Grant, his mind preoccupied with a difficult diagnosis and an overdue research paper, almost walked past the spot. But there he was, the puppy, a small, snow-dusted statue against the white backdrop, his focus absolute. Alan stopped. He wasn't an animal lover. He hadn't owned a pet since a short-lived goldfish childhood. He didn't have the time, the energy, or arguably the inclination. Yet something about this steadfast creature pulled at him. Cautiously, Alan approached, crouching a few feet away so as not to startle him. "You're still here, huh?" he said softly, his breath misting in the freezing air. The puppy lifted his head slightly, ears twitching at the sound, but made no move towards him. Those deep, liquid eyes met Alan's, and the doctor felt that strange constriction in his throat again, an unwelcome surge of emotion. "Are you waiting for someone specific?" he asked, the question hanging unanswered in the snowy silence. The dog's silent gaze seemed to hold the weight of the world. Just then, the hospital's night janitor ambled past, pushing a wide broom. "Talking to our little mascot again, Doc," he chuckled good-naturedly. "Persistent little fella, ain't he? Been here longer than some of the temps. Some say he's waiting on a patient, maybe one who didn't. Well, you know." The janitor gestured vaguely towards the upper floors before continuing on his rounds. The casual comment struck Alan with force. A patient who didn't make it out? The thought was chilling. Was this loyal creature waiting in vain for someone who would never walk through those doors again? The idea settled like lead in his stomach. He looked back at the hospital, its warm lights suddenly seeming less welcoming, potentially hiding a story of finality that this small dog couldn't comprehend. He glanced back at the puppy, a profound sense of sorrow washing over him. Over the next few nights, Alan found his departure routine changing. He'd linger, watching the puppy from a distance, trying to piece together the puzzle. He observed the subtle shifts in the dog's posture when certain people exited, the way his tail gave a hopeful thump only to still again moments later. He never barked, never whined, never begged. He simply waited, a silent testament to an unknown bond. One evening, the temperature plummeted and a biting wind whipped through the hospital grounds. Alan couldn't bear the sight of the puppy shivering violently, despite curling into the tightest possible ball. Acting on an impulse that surprised even himself, he detoured to his car, retrieved the emergency blanket he kept in the trunk, and walked back. Kneeling carefully, he gently draped the foil-lined blanket over the small, trembling body. "Here," he murmured. "This might help a bit." He expected the dog to flinch or shy away, but instead the puppy seemed to almost lean into the unexpected warmth. He looked up at Alan, a flicker of something, surprise, gratitude, in his deep eyes before turning his gaze back toward the eternally fascinating hospital doors. The brief connection, the acceptance of his small offering, resonated deeply within Alan. That night, sleep was elusive. The image of the lonely, blanket-draped puppy haunted his thoughts. Was he doing enough? His profession demanded intervention, care, action. Yet here, just outside his workplace, was a life clearly suffering, waiting for a resolution that might never come. Was this neglect by omission? The ethical boundaries of his responsibility felt suddenly, uncomfortably blurred. He resolved to do more than just watch. The next morning, Alan approached the front desk with renewed purpose. "Excuse me," he addressed the usually unflappable receptionist. "Has anyone at all asked about a small, brownish, stray dog that's been hanging around the entrance?" She barely looked up from her keyboard, fingers flying. "Dog? Oh, the one security keeps chasing off. No reports, Doctor. Grant, no calls, no inquiries. Honestly, it's like he just materialized one day and decided this was home." She offered a brief, sympathetic smile before returning to her work. Discouraged but not defeated, Alan spent his lunch break making calls. Local animal shelters, animal control, even a few vet clinics in the vicinity. The answer was always the same. No reports matched the description. The dog was a ghost, seemingly ownerless, his presence at the hospital an enigma. His curiosity festered, morphing into a quiet, persistent determination. He began leaving small bowls of food and fresh water tucked away near the puppy's spot each evening before he left. He took quiet satisfaction in finding them empty the next morning, proof the dog wasn't entirely rejecting his help, even if he remained wary and distant whenever Alan was physically present. The invisible thread connecting them strengthened, even as the mystery remained unsolved. One evening, Alan was preparing to leave, mentally running through his schedule for the next day, when he saw the puppy again, curled in his usual spot. A wave of helplessness washed over him. He gripped the steering wheel, staring at the small, resilient creature. "Why won't you leave?" he muttered, the question directed as much at himself as the dog. Why couldn't he leave this alone? Why did this one animal's plight burrow under his skin when he dealt with suffering daily? He felt inexplicably responsible, yet utterly powerless to provide the comfort the dog truly sought. The breakthrough arrived unexpectedly the following weekend. Approaching the entrance, Alan noticed a small cluster of off-duty nurses gathered near the puppy. Nurse Evans was kneeling, gently stroking the dog's head, speaking in soft, soothing tones. The puppy wasn't recoiling. He seemed to be accepting the touch. "He finally let someone pet him," Nurse Evans exclaimed, looking up with a bright smile as Alan approached. "Took weeks, but I think he's starting to trust us a little." Alan felt a surge of hope. He knelt cautiously beside Nurse Evans. "Is that true, buddy?" he asked softly, holding his hand out slowly, palm up. "Are you finally warming up to us?" He let his fingers brush against the matted fur. The puppy didn't pull back. Instead, he leaned almost imperceptibly into the touch and looked up at Alan. His eyes, usually filled with watchful sadness, now held a glimmer of something else. A fragile mixture of hope and hesitant trust, mingled with the ever-present sorrow. That look solidified Alan's resolve. He couldn't stand by any longer. He had to uncover the truth behind this dog's unwavering devotion. He owed it to the memory of whoever the dog was waiting for, and perhaps, he admitted inwardly, he owed it to himself to solve this emotional puzzle. His first concrete step was back at the animal shelter, this time with Nurse Evans facilitating. "My friend works here," she explained, leading Alan towards the intake area. "Maybe they have other resources, ways to check besides a chip." They explained the situation, the weeks-long vigil, the lack of reports, the dog's clear attachment to the hospital. The shelter staff were sympathetic but realistic. "Without a chip or tag, it's tough," the intake manager explained. "We've posted his picture on our site and shared it with local rescue groups, but honestly, after this long, if someone was frantically looking, they likely would have found him or reported him missing by now." She suggested scanning again, just in case the first attempt missed something. The scanner passed over the dog's small body once more. Nothing. "He's a ghost officially," the manager sighed. "Best we can do is keep his photo circulating." Alan felt a familiar wave of frustration. Posting photos felt passive, insufficient. There had to be a more direct connection to the hospital itself. Back at work, a fragment of overheard conversation snagged his attention. Two elderly women, waiting for appointments, were chatting quietly. "Reminds me of that story," one said, her voice thin and reedy. "You know, the dog in Japan, Hachiko, waited at the train station for his owner for years, even after the man died." Alan froze mid-stride. Waited for years after he died. Could it be that simple, that tragic? Was Buddy waiting for someone who had passed away inside the hospital? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. It was a grim possibility, but it fit the dog's unwavering, mournful vigil. He sought out Nurse Evans immediately, his mind racing. "Evans, I need your help. It's a long shot, maybe even inappropriate, but can we check patient records? Specifically, deceased patients from around the time the dog first appeared, say 3 or 4 weeks ago?" Nurse Evans looked taken aback. "Patient records, Alan? Especially deceased. That's highly confidential. There are strict privacy regulations." I know, Alan insisted, lowering his voice. "But think about it. What if his owner was admitted and never came out? What if this dog somehow tracked him here and doesn't understand he's gone? It would explain everything." He saw the hesitation in her eyes, but also a flicker of understanding. "Please, Evans, I need to know." After a moment of internal debate, weighing protocol against compassion, Nurse Evans nodded slowly. "All right, Alan, but we have to be discreet and careful. Let's look at admissions from about a month back. We'll focus on patients who lived alone or had no emergency contacts listed. Someone whose absence might not trigger an immediate search for a pet." They retreated to a quiet records room during their lunch break, the air thick with the scent of old paper and disinfectant. Hours passed as they meticulously combed through digital files and older binders, cross-referencing dates, checking admission notes, looking for any clue. It felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. Just as Alan was about to give up, Nurse Evans let out a sharp gasp. "Alan, look at this." She pointed to a specific file on her screen. "Harrison, Edward, admitted 3 weeks ago, severe myocardial infarction, passed away 2 days later." She scrolled down. "Address listed on the edge of town. And look here, under emergency contacts and next of kin, none listed. Notes indicate he lived alone." Alan leaned closer, his heart pounding. The timing fit perfectly. Lived alone. No next of kin. Mr. Edward Harrison. Could this be him? Could this be Buddy's person? "It's possible," Nurse Evans murmured, her voice hushed. "But it doesn't explain how the dog found his way here and knew to wait." "Maybe he followed an ambulance," Alan speculated. "Or maybe he just sensed. I don't know. But this feels right, Evans. This feels like the answer." That evening, sitting on the cold hospital steps beside the small waiting dog, Alan spoke the name aloud, softly, tentatively. "Mr. Harrison?" The puppy's ears twitched sharply. He lifted his head, his gaze meeting Alan's, and for a fleeting second, the deep sadness in his eyes seemed to soften, replaced by something akin to recognition. Alan's breath caught in his throat. Was that him? Was Mr. Harrison your person? The dog didn't move, didn't make a sound, but the subtle shift in his demeanor felt like confirmation. A wave of profound empathy washed over Alan. He reached out, his hand stroking the matted fur with newfound tenderness. "Oh, buddy," he whispered, the formality of doctor. Grant dissolving in the face of raw emotion. "If that's true, then I am so sorry you lost him." The puppy leaned into his touch, a silent acceptance of comfort. In that moment, Alan felt the weight of the dog's grief, and a fierce, protective resolve settled within him. "You're not alone anymore," he promised quietly, meeting the dog's soulful gaze. "I won't leave you alone." The name Edward Harrison echoed in Alan's thoughts, a key unlocking a door to a past filled with loyalty and loss. But knowing the name wasn't enough. Alan felt an imperative to understand the bond between the man and the dog, to grasp the full story behind Buddy's unwavering vigil. Driven by this need, he decided to visit Mr. Harrison's listed address. Perhaps the house itself held clues, or maybe neighbors could shed light on the life they shared. He drove out to the edge of town the following Saturday morning, Buddy sitting quietly, almost regally in the passenger seat, watching the unfamiliar scenery pass by. The house was modest, a single-story structure with faded blue paint peeling from the shutters and an overgrown garden hinting at recent neglect. Yet it possessed a certain charm, an aura of quiet dignity, like a place that had been deeply loved, even if its sole occupant had kept to himself. Alan parked the car and approached the front door, Buddy trotting calmly beside him, sniffing the air with quiet recognition. Alan hesitated, unsure what he hoped to find. Letters? Photos? Some tangible evidence of the man Buddy mourned? He knocked, the sound echoing slightly in the quiet street. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked, as expected. Feeling a bit like an intruder, he stepped back, scanning the neighboring properties. A woman in the adjacent yard, kneeling amongst burgeoning spring bulbs, looked up from her gardening, her expression wary. "Can I help you?" she asked, wiping soil from her hands onto her apron. Alan offered a reassuring smile, gesturing towards the house. "Hello, I'm Dr. Alan Grant. I work at Town Hospital. Mr. Harrison was a patient there recently." He paused, choosing his words carefully. I've ended up looking after his dog, and I was hoping to learn a little more about Mr. Harrison." The woman's guarded expression immediately softened into sadness. "Oh, Mr. Harrison, bless his heart. Such a kind, quiet man. Kept mostly to himself after his wife passed years ago, but always had a gentle word if you met him on the street." "Did you know his dog?" Alan asked, gesturing to Buddy, who sat patiently at his feet, observing the woman with intelligent eyes. Her face lit up instantly. "Oh, goodness, yes. His little brown dog. Was that his name, Buddy?" Alan nodded. "They were inseparable. You never saw Mr. Harrison taking his walks without that little shadow trotting right beside him. He doted on that dog, talked to him like he was people. That dog was his whole world, especially these last few years." Alan felt a lump form in his throat. "Do you know what happened to Buddy after Mr. Harrison?" She frowned, her brow furrowing with concern. "No, I don't. We all wondered. When the ambulance came, well, we didn't see the dog afterward. Figured he must have gotten scared and run off. Poor thing. Must have been utterly heartbroken. Mr. Harrison often said that dog understood everything." Alan took a deep breath. "He didn't run off. He came to the hospital. He's been waiting outside every night for the past 3 weeks." The woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, eyes wide with astonishment and sorrow. "Waiting? At the hospital? Oh, that poor, loyal creature. He must not understand. He must think Mr. Harrison is still inside, waiting to come home." Tears welled in her eyes. "That dog loved him more than anything. If he's there, it's because he simply doesn't know." The conversation confirmed Alan's suspicions and deepened his empathy for Buddy's plight. He thanked the neighbor for her time, her words painting a vivid picture of the quiet man and his devoted companion. Driving back towards town, Buddy now asleep on the seat beside him, Alan felt the weight of responsibility settle more heavily. He couldn't return Buddy to the cold hospital steps. Not now. That evening, Alan made a decision that would irrevocably alter the quiet predictability of his life. He approached Buddy, who had resumed his usual watchful post near the hospital entrance after Alan's shift. Kneeling down, leash in hand, Alan spoke softly. "Hey, Buddy, no more waiting out here in the cold, okay? How about you come home with me? For good this time, I'll take care of you." Buddy looked up at him, head tilted, as if considering the offer. There was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, perhaps the ingrained habit of his vigil warring with the memory of the man who hadn't returned. But then slowly, tentatively, his tail gave a slight, hesitant wag. He nudged Alan's outstretched hand with his nose. Taking it as acceptance, Alan gently slipped the leash over Buddy's neck. For the first time, Buddy followed willingly, walking beside Alan not towards a shelter van or a temporary refuge, but towards Alan's car, towards a new beginning. Alan's apartment, usually a sanctuary of minimalist order and quiet solitude, felt instantly transformed by Buddy's presence. He set up a comfortable dog bed in a corner of the living room, filled bowls with food and fresh water, and bought a few simple toys. Buddy explored his new surroundings cautiously at first, sniffing every corner, his paws clicking softly on the polished hardwood floors. He seemed overwhelmed, yet relieved. After a thorough inspection, he settled onto the bed with a soft sigh, watching Alan with those intelligent, soulful eyes. "It's not the same as being with Mr. Harrison, I know. Alan said, crouching beside the bed. But it's safe here, buddy. You're home. The following days marked a period of quiet adjustment. Buddy proved to be an exceptionally well-behaved companion, house-trained and gentle. He followed Alan from room to room, a quiet shadow offering silent company. Alan found his own routines shifting. Morning walks became part of his pre-work ritual, the brisk air and Buddy's quiet presence clearing his head before facing the demands of the hospital. Evenings were no longer spent solely with medical journals or takeout cartons. They now included shared silence on the couch, Alan reading while Buddy dozed nearby, or the rhythmic crunch of kibble during Buddy's dinner time. The apartment felt less sterile, less empty. For the first time in years, Alan felt a sense of genuine companionship, an easing of a loneliness he hadn't fully acknowledged until it began to lift. However, Buddy's grief hadn't vanished. It had simply found a new context. Some evenings, Alan would find him sitting by the apartment door, staring intently, a low whine escaping his throat, waiting perhaps for a footstep that would never come. The sound of certain cars passing on the street below might trigger a hopeful bark, followed by a visible slump of disappointment when the sound faded. These moments were poignant reminders of the depth of Buddy's loss. One evening, while Alan was catching up on emails, Buddy became unusually restless, pacing between the living room and the kitchen, whining softly. "What's wrong, boy?" Alan asked, concerned. Buddy trotted over to Alan, nudged his hand, then darted towards the apartment door, looking back expectantly, pawing lightly at the wood. Alan frowned. "You need to go out." He clipped on the leash and opened the door, expecting Buddy to head for his usual spot in the small park across the street. Instead, Buddy pulled purposefully in the opposite direction, navigating the familiar sidewalks with an unfamiliar urgency. Confused but intrigued, Alan followed. Buddy led him several blocks away. Through quieter residential streets, Alan rarely walked, finally turning into a larger, dimly lit park on the outskirts of town. "What are we doing here, Buddy?" Alan asked, pulling his jacket tighter against the cool night air. Buddy barked softly, a low, insistent sound, and trotted ahead towards a specific secluded bench nestled under the broad canopy of an old oak tree, illuminated by a single flickering street lamp. Alan followed, his curiosity piqued. As they neared the bench, Alan saw something resting upon it, a plain white envelope. His heart gave a sudden lurch. He picked it up. Scrawled across the front in slightly shaky handwriting was the name, Edward Harrison. With trembling fingers, Alan opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, covered in the same handwriting, the ink slightly faded and smudged in places. He began to read aloud, his voice barely a whisper in the quiet park. "My dearest companion," it began, "if you are somehow reading this, or perhaps having it read to you by a kind soul who has found you, it means my time has come, and I have left this world behind." Alan continued reading, his voice growing thick with emotion. It was Mr. Harrison's final testament, addressed directly to his beloved dog. He wrote of their years together, the joy Buddy had brought into his quiet life after his wife's passing, the comfort Buddy provided during his lonely days and worsening illness. He expressed profound gratitude for Buddy's unwavering loyalty, his silent understanding. He didn't dwell on his suffering, but focused on his love for Buddy and his deep, heartfelt wish for the dog to find happiness and care after he was gone. "Don't wait for me, little friend," he'd written. "Find someone kind. Share the love you gave so freely to me. Know that you were the best friend a lonely old man could have ever asked for. Thank you, my buddy." By the time Alan finished reading, tears were streaming unchecked down his face. The depth of love, the quiet dignity, the final, selfless wish for his companion, it was overwhelming. Buddy sat pressed tightly against Alan's leg, his head resting on the doctor's knee, emitting a soft, low whine, as if he understood the significance of the words, the finality they represented. Alan wrapped an arm around the small, warm body, stroking his fur. "He loved you so much, Buddy," he choked out. "So very much." He held the letter, a tangible piece of the bond that had led this loyal dog on his heartbreaking vigil, and felt the weight of his own promise solidify. "I'll honor that love, boy," I promise you. How the letter got to the bench remained a mystery, perhaps placed by Mr. Harrison himself in a moment of foresight, or maybe by a knowing neighbor fulfilling a final request. Regardless, finding it felt like a sacred trust had been passed on. The discovery of the letter brought both solace and new questions. It cemented the depth of the bond between Mr. Harrison and Buddy, but it also highlighted the lingering mystery. If Mr. Harrison knew his time was short, why hadn't he made explicit arrangements for Buddy's care? Why leave his beloved companion's fate seemingly to chance, resulting in the weeks-long vigil at the hospital? The neighbor had mentioned an estranged sister. Perhaps she held the key not only to Mr. Harrison's past, but also to his final intentions. Alan felt a responsibility to seek her out, not just for answers, but potentially to fulfill any wishes Mr. Harrison might have had regarding Buddy or his own legacy. Using the sparse information from the hospital file and a bit of online searching, Alan located Edward Harrison's sister, Eleanor Vance, living in a neighboring town. He debated how to approach her. A phone call felt too impersonal, potentially intrusive given their estrangement. He decided a visit, with Buddy accompanying him, might be the gentlest way to bridge the gap. On a crisp spring morning, they drove to Eleanor's address, a neat bungalow with carefully tended flower beds. Alan took a deep breath, Buddy waiting patiently by the car door, and knocked. The door opened a crack, revealing a woman in her late 50s, her face etched with weariness and a lifetime of unspoken regrets. Her eyes were sharp, guarded. "Yes? Can I help you?" "Ms. Vance, Eleanor?" Alan began tentatively. "My name is Dr. Alan Grant. I'm a doctor at Town Hospital. Your brother, Edward Harrison, was a patient there recently." He saw her expression tighten, a flicker of pain crossing her features. I've been looking after his dog, Buddy," he continued, gesturing toward the car where Buddy now sat, watching them intently. "I found your name, and I hope perhaps you could tell me a little more about your brother, especially regarding his final wishes." At the mention of Buddy, Eleanor's guarded expression crumbled. "Buddy?" she whispered, the name catching in her throat. Her gaze flew towards the car, softening instantly as she saw the familiar brown dog. Tears sprang to her eyes. "Oh, Edward's Buddy. I haven't seen him since before Edward got really sick." She opened the door wider. "Please, come in. Both of you." Inside, the house was tidy but filled with a quiet melancholy. Eleanor sank onto an armchair, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, while Buddy cautiously sniffed the new surroundings before settling near Alan's feet, seeming to sense the emotional weight in the room. Over hesitant cups of tea, Eleanor slowly, painfully recounted the story of her fractured relationship with Edward. A bitter argument years ago, centered around their parents' inheritance and fueled by stubborn pride on both sides, had created a rift that neither had known how to bridge. Years of silence followed, punctuated only by occasional, awkward holiday cards. "I heard he was unwell," Eleanor confessed, her voice thick with unshed tears. "A neighbor called me. I thought about visiting, I truly did. But I was afraid. Afraid he wouldn't want to see me. Afraid of reopening old wounds. I told myself it was too late, that he wouldn't forgive me." She twisted the tissue in her hands. Pride. Such a foolish, destructive thing. Alan listened patiently, sensing the deep well of regret beneath her words. He decided to offer a piece of comfort he possessed. "He mentioned you, Eleanor, not by name perhaps, but in the letter he left for Buddy. He described the discovery in the park, the heartfelt words Mr. Harrison had written. He spoke of forgiveness, of wanting happiness for those he cared about, even if things had been complicated." Eleanor gasped, fresh tears spilling over. She reached out a trembling hand towards Buddy, who nudged it gently with his nose. "He tried to reach out, didn't he?" she whispered, confirming Alan's unspoken question. "Towards the end. Left messages. Even came by once, but I didn't answer the door." Her voice broke. "I was a coward, and now he's gone, and I never got to say goodbye Never got to tell him I was sorry. She looked at Buddy, her gaze filled with remorse. And I wasn't there for him, she added softly, stroking Buddy's head. Edward loved this little dog more than anything in the world. Seeing her raw grief, Alan felt a surge of purpose. It's not too late to honor his memory, Eleanor, he said gently but firmly. We can do that together. Help me care for Buddy. Help me understand what Edward might have wanted. Eleanor looked up, a flicker of resolve entering her tear-filled eyes. Yes, she said, nodding slowly. Yes, I want to help. For Edward and for Buddy. It's the least I can do. Their collaboration began tentatively. Eleanor shared memories of Edward, painting a picture of a man who, beneath his quiet and sometimes stubborn exterior, possessed a deep well of kindness and a profound connection with animals. She suggested they visit Edward's house together, to properly sort through his belongings and look for any specific instructions or items related to Buddy. The return to Edward's house was emotionally charged for both of them. The small, cluttered space felt heavy with his absence, yet filled with the echoes of his life. Buddy explored with a mixture of excitement and confusion, his tail wagging as he rediscovered familiar scents, pausing sadly by his empty food bowl. Eleanor moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching objects, a worn armchair, a collection of bird-watching books, her face etched with sorrow and lost time. While sorting through a desk drawer filled with old bills and receipts, Alan discovered a worn, leather-bound journal. He opened it carefully. It was Edward's personal log, kept sporadically during the last year of his illness. The entries were brief, often poignant, chronicling his declining health, but focusing more often on the simple joys provided by his canine companion. Bad day today, one entry read. Pain kept me in bed, but Buddy stayed right beside me, head on the pillow, knew I needed him. Another entry detailed a walk in the park, describing the way Buddy chased squirrels with comical intensity. And then Alan found it, several pages outlining an idea, a dream Edward had been nurturing. He read aloud to Eleanor. Been thinking, so many animals out there don't get the care they need. Shelters are overwhelmed. Maybe I could leave something behind. A small fund. Or perhaps something more active. A service, maybe a van, to bring basic vet care to people who can't afford it or can't travel. Inspired by Buddy, of course. He brings so much comfort. Wish all animals could have that chance, and people could have that companionship. His illness had clearly progressed before he could formalize the plan. Eleanor listened, her eyes widening. A mobile clinic or a fund? Oh, Alan, that's so Edward, quietly wanting to help, inspired by his dog. A new energy seemed to fill her. We have to do this, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. This is his legacy. This is how we honor him. The shared discovery, the tangible evidence of Edward's final dream, forged a stronger bond between Alan and Eleanor. Grief began to meld with purpose. Caring for Buddy was no longer just about managing loss. It was about building something positive, something Edward Harrison himself had envisioned. They had found their mission. Turning Edward Harrison's nascent dream into reality was a formidable task. Alan, a pediatrician with minimal knowledge of nonprofit management, and Eleanor, still grappling with grief and guilt, felt simultaneously energized and overwhelmed. They decided to start by establishing the Harrison Fund with the initial goal of supporting existing local animal shelters while researching the feasibility of the more ambitious mobile clinic concept. They began reaching out, armed with Edward's journal entry and the poignant story of Buddy's loyalty. Initial responses were mixed. Some shelter directors were receptive but cautious, burdened by their own funding struggles. Others were skeptical, viewing Alan and Eleanor as well-intentioned but perhaps naive outsiders. Resistance wasn't overt, but securing partnerships and generating enthusiasm required persistence. Alan found himself leveraging skills he rarely used outside the hospital: persuasion, networking, quiet determination. He spoke at small community group meetings, sharing Buddy's story, showing the framed letter, explaining Edward's vision. Eleanor, drawing on a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed, managed the administrative side, setting up accounts, drafting proposals. Buddy naturally became the unofficial ambassador. His gentle demeanor and soulful eyes melted hearts wherever they went. A simple photo of Buddy sitting attentively beside Edward's framed letter became a powerful symbol for their fundraising materials. Slowly, momentum began to build. Small donations trickled in from neighbors who remembered Edward fondly, from hospital staff moved by Buddy's story, from strangers touched by the narrative shared online. Alan noticed a profound change in Eleanor. The heavy cloak of guilt she carried began to lift, replaced by a vibrant sense of purpose. She started spending afternoons volunteering at one of the shelters they were partnering with, finding solace in caring for animals who reminded her of Buddy. Alan, too, found an unexpected richness filling the voids in his own life. Balancing his demanding hospital schedule with the burgeoning demands of the Harrison Fund was exhausting, but the sense of fulfillment, the tangible impact they were beginning to make, was deeply rewarding. Just as things seemed to be progressing smoothly, a new complication arose, adding another layer to Buddy's already complex history. One afternoon, while Alan and Eleanor were meeting with a potential donor at the shelter where Eleanor volunteered, a woman approached them hesitantly. She introduced herself as Rachel Miller. "Excuse me," she began, her expression earnest, slightly anxious. "I heard you talking about the Harrison Fund and about Buddy." She glanced towards Buddy, who was lying calmly at Alan's feet. "I know him, or rather, I knew him when he was much younger." Alan and Eleanor exchanged surprised glances. "You knew Buddy?" Alan asked. Rachel nodded. "My family fostered him as a puppy before Mr. Harrison adopted him. We called him Rusty back then. We loved him dearly, but circumstances changed, and we had to give him up to the rescue organization. It broke our hearts." Her eyes glistened with remembered pain. "I saw his picture online, the story about him waiting at the hospital. I couldn't believe it was him after all these years." Her revelation added an unexpected dimension. This dog, already a symbol of loyalty to one man, had also been cherished and lost by another family. There was no malice in Rachel's demeanor, only a desire to connect with a piece of her past. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she assured them quickly. "I saw how devoted he was to Mr. Harrison, and I see how much he means to you both now. I wanted you to know his beginnings. He brought our family so much joy before he found Mr. Harrison." Eleanor, her own experiences with loss making her empathetic, reached out. "Thank you for telling us, Rachel. It means a lot to know more of his story. It's clear he touches many lives." They exchanged contact information, agreeing to talk more later. Rachel's appearance was a reminder of the complex tapestry of love, loss, and connection woven around this one small dog. This burgeoning success and heartwarming backstory, however, soon attracted a different, less welcome kind of attention. As Buddy's story gained local media traction, a small newspaper article, a mention on a community radio show, it caught the eye of Victor Sterling. Sterling headed a regional marketing agency known for its aggressive tactics and its ability to spin compelling narratives for profit. He saw Buddy's story not as a testament to loyalty, but as a potentially lucrative brand asset. Sterling arranged a meeting with Alan and Eleanor under the guise of offering pro bono marketing advice for the Harrison Fund. He arrived at the shelter impeccably dressed, radiating confidence and corporate charm. After initial pleasantries and feigned admiration for their work, he unveiled his true proposal. "Buddy's story is pure gold," Sterling declared, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Loyalty, loss, rescue, it resonates. I envision a nationwide campaign, Buddy's Pledge, promoting pet adoption, sponsored by a major pet food brand. Commercials, public appearances for Buddy, maybe even a line of merchandise. The potential reach is enormous, and a significant portion of the proceeds," he added smoothly, "could fund your Harrison Fund indefinitely." Alan felt an immediate visceral revulsion. "Buddy isn't a brand," he stated flatly. "He's a dog who lost his person and found a home. We won't exploit his story or him. Eleanor, however, seemed momentarily swayed by the potential funding. Think of the good we could do, Alan, she murmured, picturing expanded shelters, more resources for the mobile clinic. Millions could hear Edward's message. Sterling pressed his advantage. This isn't exploitation, it's amplification. It's what Mr. Harrison, a man who clearly loved animals, would have wanted. The greatest possible impact. But Alan held firm. Number, our work honors Mr. Harrison's specific dream, quietly and authentically. We won't turn Buddy into a commodity. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Sterling, but we're not interested. Sterling's charming facade hardened almost imperceptibly. A pity, he said coolly, rising. A missed opportunity, but I admire your, principles. He left, leaving an unpleasant chill in the air. His retreat, however, was merely strategic. Within days, unsettling things began to happen. Anonymous, negative comments appeared on the Harrison Fund's social media pages, questioning their finances, hinting at mismanagement. Then came the note slipped under the shelter door late one night. Buddy doesn't belong to you. Give him back. Alan and Eleanor felt a sickening lurch of anxiety. Sterling? Eleanor whispered, showing Alan the note. It has to be, Alan agreed grimly. He's trying to intimidate us, destabilize us. They reported the incidents and increased vigilance, but the sense of being targeted was deeply unnerving. The situation escalated dramatically when Sterling contacted them again, this time through a lawyer. The lawyer curtly informed them that another party, unnamed, had come forward claiming to be Buddy's original legal owner, asserting that Mr. Harrison's adoption years ago was invalid due to procedural errors. They were demanding Buddy's immediate return, threatening imminent legal action if Alan and Eleanor didn't comply. It's fabricated, Alan insisted, pacing Eleanor's living room. We have the story from Rachel, his fosterer before Mr. Harrison. But do we have legal proof of the adoption itself? Eleanor fretted. Edward was private. His paperwork might be hard to find. The threat felt real, terrifying. Losing Buddy now was unthinkable. It became clear Sterling wasn't just moving on. He was actively trying to wrest Buddy and his valuable story away from them, likely to use him in his own campaign, regardless of their refusal. The battle for Edward Harrison's legacy, and for Buddy himself, had just begun in earnest. The threat of legal action hung over Alan and Eleanor like a storm cloud, casting a pall over the progress they'd made with the Harrison Fund and the mobile clinic planning. Victor Sterling, true to his nature, didn't wait for legal filings to escalate his attack. A sophisticated smear campaign began almost immediately. Anonymous blogs and newly created social media accounts popped up, spreading insidious rumors. Alan and Eleanor were exploiting Buddy for donations, lining their own pockets. Mr. Harrison's adoption was indeed fraudulent. They were unqualified to run an animal welfare initiative. Subtle paid ads echoing these sentiments appeared in local online forums. The effect was corrosive. While their core supporters remained loyal, doubts began to surface in the wider community. Donations slowed. Potential volunteers hesitated. The positive momentum they had carefully built began to falter under the weight of suspicion. He's trying to destroy our credibility before we even get to court, Eleanor said, scrolling through hateful online comments with a weary sigh. They were meeting late at the shelter office, surrounded by clinic blueprints and fundraising spreadsheets that suddenly felt less hopeful. Buddy lay curled under the desk, sensing the tension, occasionally emitting a low, troubled whine. Alan rubbed his temples, the stress of juggling his hospital duties with this relentless assault taking its toll. We need concrete proof, Eleanor. Proof of the adoption. Proof of Sterling's manipulation. Remembering Rachel Miller, the woman whose family had fostered Buddy initially, Alan reached out. Rachel was horrified to hear about the fabricated claims and Sterling's tactics. "That's outrageous!" she exclaimed. "Mr. Harrison adopted Buddy fair and square from the rescue. He even visited us afterward, sent pictures. He wouldn't have done anything improper." Rachel readily agreed to provide a sworn affidavit detailing her family's fostering experience and their knowledge of the legitimate adoption process. She also began digging through old family records, hoping to find correspondence from the rescue agency or Mr. Harrison that might help. Her immediate willingness to stand with them was a much-needed balm. Meanwhile, Alan and Eleanor spent hours searching through the boxes of belongings retrieved from Mr. Harrison's house, praying for a crucial piece of paper. Tucked away in a folder filled with old veterinary receipts and pet food coupons, Alan finally found it. A worn, folded document. It was the official adoption agreement from the Second Chances Rescue League, dated nearly 8 years prior, clearly stating Edward Harrison as the adopter of a mixed-breed puppy matching Buddy's description, complete with signatures and the rescue's letterhead. Relief washed over him, potent and immediate. "We found it, Eleanor! We found the adoption papers." Armed with the papers and Rachel's affidavit, they felt more confident, but their lawyer cautioned them. "This is excellent," she advised during a tense consultation. "But Sterling is playing dirty. Fabricated claims, even if ultimately dismissed, can cause significant damage through legal costs and public relations nightmares. He wants to bleed you dry or force you to give up Buddy just to make it stop." Just as their lawyer predicted, the official lawsuit arrived, filed by an anonymous Jane Doe, represented by Sterling's legal firm, alleging improper adoption procedures and demanding Buddy's immediate surrender. The legal battle consumed time, energy, and precious funds earmarked for the clinic. Then came an unexpected break. One evening, a plain envelope marked "Confidential" was delivered to the shelter. Inside was an anonymous letter and copies of internal emails from Sterling's agency. The sender, claiming to be a disgruntled former employee disgusted by Sterling's tactics, detailed precisely how Sterling's team had identified a distant relative of the original rescue organizers, who had since passed away, and coerced them into acting as the anonymous plaintiff, manufacturing evidence to support the bogus claim. The emails explicitly discussed the plan to discredit the doctor and the sister and secure the asset, referring to Buddy. "This is dynamite," their lawyer breathed, examining the documents. "If we can authenticate this, it exposes Sterling's entire scheme. It's not just perjury, it's potential fraud and conspiracy." Authentication took time and careful legal maneuvering, but the anonymous source provided enough leads for their lawyer to subpoena corroborating records. The tide began to turn. The court hearing was fraught with tension. Sterling's lawyer attempted to portray Alan and Eleanor as emotionally compromised individuals, clinging to a dog that wasn't rightfully theirs, casting doubt on the aged adoption papers. But their lawyer systematically presented their evidence. The official adoption contract, Rachel Miller's compelling and heartfelt testimony about Mr. Harrison's character and the adoption's legitimacy, and finally the bombshell evidence of Sterling's internal communications, proving malicious intent and fabrication. Under cross-examination, confronted with his own agency's emails, Victor Sterling crumbled. His composure cracked, revealing the calculating, ruthless operator beneath the polished veneer. He deflected and blustered, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, deemed frivolous and potentially malicious. The judge issued a stern warning to Sterling and his firm regarding ethical conduct. Emerging from the courthouse into the glare of waiting news cameras, Alan, Eleanor, and Rachel stood together, exhausted but vindicated. "Buddy is staying where he belongs," Alan announced, his voice clear and steady. "He is home, and we will continue to honor the legacy of Mr. Edward Harrison, whose dream of helping animals will not be derailed by greed or lies." The legal victory was immense, but the battle had taken its toll. Funds were depleted, time had been lost, and the smear campaign, though ultimately unsuccessful in court, had left scars on their reputation within parts of the community. They knew defeating Sterling legally wasn't the end. They now had to rebuild trust and fully realize the dream he had tried so hard to sabotage. The mobile clinic, once a hopeful blueprint, now felt more urgent, more necessary than ever, a symbol of their resilience and the enduring power of Edward Harrison's quiet vision. Vindicated by the court but bruised by the battle, Alan and Eleanor faced the challenge of rebuilding momentum. The Harrison Fund's finances were strained by legal fees, and the shadow of Victor Sterling's smear campaign lingered, making some potential donors and partners hesitant. They realized that simply winning in court wasn't enough. They needed to demonstrate tangibly and consistently the value and integrity of their mission. The mobile veterinary clinic became their central focus, the most powerful way to honor Edward's vision and restore public faith. They poured their energy into making it operational. Eleanor, meticulous and determined, navigated the bureaucratic maze of permits, insurance, and regulations. Alan used his medical background to consult on equipping the clinic van, ensuring it could provide essential services, vaccinations, basic diagnostics, minor treatments, spay, neuter surgeries. They recruited a small, dedicated team, a compassionate part-time veterinarian willing to work reduced hours, a skilled veterinary technician, Maria, the same tech who had first told Alan about Edward's mobile clinic idea, eagerly joined the cause, and a roster of passionate volunteers coordinated by Eleanor. Fundraising resumed, but with a different approach. Instead of just asking for donations, they hosted Meet the Mission events at the shelter, showcasing their plans, introducing the team, and always featuring Buddy as the living embodiment of their purpose. They emphasized transparency, publishing detailed budget reports online. Slowly, trust began to rebuild. Local businesses offered in-kind donations, fuel for the van, discounted medical supplies, printing services. The community started to rally around them again, drawn by their resilience and unwavering commitment. Rachel Miller, now a firm friend and ally, used her community connections to help organize volunteer drives and spread the word, effectively counteracting the lingering negativity from Sterling's campaign. Her presence, representing Buddy's earlier life, added another layer of authenticity that resonated with people. The mobile clinic, affectionately christened Harrison's Hope on Wheels, finally hit the road. Its initial focus was on underserved neighborhoods on the outskirts of town and nearby rural areas where access to veterinary care was limited or unaffordable. The first few weeks were a learning curve: logistical challenges, building trust with wary residents, managing a demanding schedule. But the impact was immediate and profound. They treated aging pets whose owners couldn't afford escalating vet bills, vaccinated puppies in low-income housing projects, provided guidance on pet care, and performed subsidized spay-neuter procedures to help control the stray population. Each successful intervention, each grateful pet owner, fueled the team's dedication. Buddy often accompanied them on clinic days, when appropriate and safe, his calm presence acting as an icebreaker, easing the anxiety of both pets and people. He seemed to understand his role, offering gentle nudges and quiet companionship. Just as Harrison's Hope on Wheels was establishing its rhythm and proving its worth, disaster struck the region. A series of violent late-spring thunderstorms culminated in a torrential downpour that lasted for nearly 2 days. Rivers overflowed their banks, and low-lying areas experienced flash flooding. Then came the catastrophic news: a chemical storage facility near an industrial zone upstream had been compromised by the floodwaters, releasing toxic substances into the already dangerous deluge. Mandatory evacuations were ordered for several downstream neighborhoods. Emergency services were stretched to their absolute limit, focusing on human rescue and containment of the chemical spill. Reports started trickling in via emergency channels and frantic social media posts. Pets left behind in evacuated homes. Stray animals trapped by the rising, contaminated water. Official animal control was overwhelmed. Eleanor received an urgent crackling call from Rachel, who lived near the affected area. "It's bad, Eleanor. People had minutes to leave. Many couldn't take their pets. Animals are stranded on roofs, trapped inside flooded houses. The water's still rising, and they're saying it's toxic. Someone needs to help them." Without hesitation, Alan and Eleanor mobilized. This was exactly the kind of crisis Edward Harrison would have wanted his legacy to address. Rallying their vet, Tech Maria, and a core group of experienced volunteers, they prepared the mobile clinic not just for medical aid, but as a rescue command center. They loaded crates, catch poles, life vests, first aid supplies, decontamination materials, and extra food and water. Coordinating hastily with overwhelmed emergency officials to gain access to the restricted zones, Harrison's Hope on Wheels headed towards the disaster area. The scene was chaotic and heartbreaking. Murky, chemical-sheened water swirled through residential streets. Debris floated everywhere. Frightened animals, dogs barking desperately from porches, surrounded by water, cats clinging precariously to floating objects or rooftops, were visible amidst the devastation. Alan took charge of the rescue logistics, dividing the team into small, safety-conscious units equipped with radios. "Safety first," he emphasized. "No unnecessary risks. Stay in contact." Eleanor managed communications and coordinated transport for rescued animals back to a temporary triage area they set up on higher ground near the clinic van. The rescues were harrowing. Maria used her technical skills to coax terrified, half-submerged animals into crates. Volunteers carefully navigated treacherous waters in borrowed rowboats. Eleanor waded through waist-deep, contaminated water to reach a shivering dog trapped on a porch swing. Buddy, kept safely leashed near the command post, seemed to sense the gravity of the situation, barking encouragement or whining softly as rescued animals were brought in. At one point, Alan was trying to reach a litter of puppies stranded on the roof of a flooded shed. The ground beneath him, saturated and unstable, suddenly gave way. He stumbled, losing his balance, the acrid floodwater rushing around his legs, threatening to pull him under. For a terrifying moment, he struggled to find purchase. Then Buddy, who had somehow slipped his minder's hold, was there, barking insistently from the edge of the stable ground, his focused presence cutting through Alan's panic. Seeing Buddy's unwavering stance helped Alan find the leverage he needed to pull himself back to safety, scoop up the whimpering puppies, and get them into a waiting crate. They worked tirelessly through the night and into the dawn, rescuing dozens of animals, dogs, cats, even a few bewildered rabbits and caged birds. Exhausted, soaked, and emotionally drained, they ferried the last of the rescued animals back to the shelter, which had been quickly converted into an emergency intake center. The mobile clinic became a critical care hub. The vet and Maria worked non-stop, treating injuries, administering fluids, performing decontamination washes, and comforting traumatized animals. Buddy moved amongst the temporary kennels, offering quiet reassurance, licking a frightened kitten clean, nuzzling a trembling dog, a furry four-legged therapist. News of their volunteer rescue operation spread like wildfire. Local news crews, initially focused on the spill and human evacuations, arrived at the shelter, capturing compelling images of the rescued animals and the dedicated team. Alan and Eleanor, weary but resolute, gave interviews, emphasizing the desperate need for animal welfare considerations during disasters. "Every life matters," Eleanor stated, her voice hoarse but firm. "When official services are overwhelmed, the community has to step up. This clinic, this shelter, this is what Edward Harrison dreamed of, being here when help is needed most." The public response was overwhelming. The story transformed the perception of Harrison's Haven. They weren't just a local shelter, they were heroes. Donations surged, volunteer applications quadrupled, and offers of support poured in from across the state. Policymakers who had previously been lukewarm or even obstructive now publicly lauded their swift, effective response. Amidst this wave of positive recognition, Victor Sterling made his final, pathetic attempt at sabotage. He filed a frivolous lawsuit claiming the mobile clinic's rescue operation had violated safety protocols and endangered the public. But his timing couldn't have been worse. Faced with the irrefutable evidence of the lives saved and the outpouring of public gratitude for the clinic's actions, the lawsuit was summarily dismissed by an exasperated judge who ordered Sterling to pay Alan and Eleanor's legal costs. It was the final, ignominious nail in the coffin of Sterling's campaign against them. He vanished from the public eye, his reputation in tatters. Harrison's Haven, forged in loyalty and tested by adversity, had not only survived but emerged stronger, its purpose clearer and its future brighter than ever. In the weeks and months following the storm and the definitive legal victory, Harrison's Haven underwent a remarkable transformation. The surge in donations and community support allowed Alan and Eleanor to not only recover from the financial strain, but to significantly expand their operations. The planned new wing was completed ahead of schedule, providing spacious, comfortable housing for more animals. The mobile clinic received upgraded equipment and extended its service routes, becoming a vital, trusted resource in multiple communities. The shelter itself became a vibrant hub of activity. Volunteers buzzed with energy, cleaning kennels, walking dogs, socializing cats, assisting with adoption events. Educational programs, spearheaded by Eleanor and often featuring Buddy as the star guest, flourished in local schools, teaching children about responsible pet ownership and compassion. Alan, while still dedicated to his pediatric patients, found immense satisfaction in overseeing the strategic growth of the Haven, ensuring Edward Harrison's legacy was not just preserved, but actively expanding. Buddy, now universally recognized as the heart and soul of Harrison's Haven, thrived in his role as resident ambassador. His gentle nature and quiet resilience continued to inspire everyone he met. Visitors came specifically to see him, to hear his story, to feel the tangible connection to the loyalty that started it all. He greeted everyone with a calm dignity, accepting pets from giggling children and offering silent comfort to prospective adopters nervous about opening their hearts again. One sunny afternoon, the Haven hosted a large community appreciation day, celebrating the volunteers, donors, and the success of the rescue efforts. The courtyard pulsed with joyous energy. Rescued animals, now healthy and adopted into loving homes, returned for a visit, their happy barks and playful antics a living testament to the shelter's mission. Alan stood before the gathered crowd, Buddy sitting calmly at his side. "Look around you," he said, his voice filled with genuine emotion. "This isn't just a building with animals. This is a community built on compassion. It started with one man's love for his dog, and it grew because each of you chose to care, to help, to believe in second chances. Edward Harrison dreamed of this, and together, we've made it real." Applause erupted, warm and sustained. Eleanor joined him, placing a hand on Buddy's back. "Every animal saved, every family completed, every child taught kindness. That is Edward's enduring legacy," she added, her voice thick with tears. Later, as the event wound down, Lisa, the owner of Daisy, the puppy Alan and Buddy had saved during the flood, approached them, carrying a small, handcrafted plaque. "We wanted you to have this," she said, presenting it to Alan and Eleanor. It read, "Harrison's Haven, where hope finds a home." "You didn't just save Daisy," Lisa continued, kneeling to give Buddy an affectionate scratch behind the ears. "You saved a piece of our hearts, and this place, it gives hope to so many." That evening, as twilight settled over the Haven, Alan and Eleanor sat on the familiar porch swing outside the main office. Buddy lay stretched out contentedly at their feet, occasionally thumping his tail against the wooden planks. The air hummed with the peaceful sounds of the shelter settling down for the night. "We actually did it, didn't we?" Eleanor murmured, a sense of wonder in her voice. "From that first conversation in my living room, through Sterling, the flood, we built this." Alan nodded, looking out at the warm lights glowing in the kennel windows, the silhouette of the mobile clinic parked nearby. "We did, and it's more than just buildings or services. It's connection." He thought of the volunteers, the adopters, the children, Eleanor, Rachel, and mostly the quiet, loyal dog at his feet who had inadvertently changed the course of his life. Just then, Eleanor's phone pinged with an email notification. She scanned it, her eyes widening. "Alan, look at this." She handed him the phone. It was an invitation from a prestigious National Animal Welfare Foundation, impressed by their innovative mobile clinic model in disaster response efforts. They were inviting Harrison's Haven to partner on a major initiative to replicate their model in other underserved regions across the country. A slow smile spread across Alan's face as he read the proposal. "It's happening, Eleanor," he said, a profound sense of fulfillment washing over him. "Edward's dream. It's going national." He looked down at Buddy, who lifted his head, sensing the shift in atmosphere. The dog's eyes, once filled with unbearable sorrow and waiting, now held a quiet wisdom, a deep calm. He had journeyed from lonely vigil to beloved companion, from catalyst for grief to symbol of hope. As the first stars began to prick the darkening sky, Alan knew their work was far from over. New challenges and opportunities lay ahead, but surrounded by the tangible results of compassion and perseverance, anchored by the unwavering loyalty of the dog who started it all, they were ready. Edward Harrison's legacy was secure, vibrant, and reaching further than perhaps even he had ever dreamed. If you were inspired by this story, join us in making a difference. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales of courage, resilience, and hope. And don't miss our next story, another incredible journey that will touch your heart and remind you of the power of compassion.